Welcome to the realm of magic and mystery, classic horror and sci-fi. You are now entering the House of the Unusual podcast with your hosts, Eddie and Joe. Welcome everyone to House of the Unusual podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pavlansky. With me as always is the maestro of mail order mysteries and owner of House of the Unusual, Eddie Guevara. Today's special guest is the returning Michal Mezmer, CHT. Michael, how's it going?
Doing great. I'm so excited with everything opening up in our country again and things happening again. So I'm really doing great. I'm doing a lot of shows out here in the LA area and just having a great time and excited about the new Scary Monsters hitting the stands.
Awesome. Now, you've been on this podcast once before, so for people that might not have caught you on there, let our audience know a little bit about yourself and what you do out there.
Well, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, and I am hypnotherapist for the Unger Medical Group here in LA area. So I help a lot of people that way. I also hold a degree in psychology. I also am a world-class magician. I've toured to 25 countries, won many awards, even performed for Michael Jackson and people like that. I also am a writer for Scary Monsters magazine. So I do a lot of different things. My hands are in a lot of different, pies, but I have a lot of fun and enjoy what I do.
Awesome. Well, welcome back. And speaking of Scary Monsters, I just read your article today. I was saving it so it's fresh in my mind, and I definitely like to dig into that a little bit with you. But before we do that, Eddie, what's new over at the House of the Unusual? We've been having some technical difficulties tonight.
I know I think we're cursed with. I have a feeling that maybe Chuck was walking by the cemetery.
Yes.
Somebody angry at us, I mean, it's the only thing I could see here. All these technical difficulties, like we always have. But anyway, I'm getting together and finishing up a line of products with Chuck, and we're finishing up about 4 or 5 tricks right now, which should go live soon on House of the Unusual YouTube channel. And other than that, I also finished reading today Michael's article in Scary Monsters. It was very fascinating. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. That's for sure.
Awesome. And if anyone out there hasn't visited the site lately, check it out. Eddie's completely revamped it, and it looks fantastic. There's a huge pair of hypnotic eyes staring at you to keep you on the site. There's a lot of good videos on there from the YouTube channel. If you haven't gone to the YouTube channel lately, check out House of the Unusual. Type it in your search. Some great videos out there. So let's see what's new on my end. Well, I got this week. There was I found a link on Universal Monster Army's forum site. It was for a new fanzine on the Gillman. So I ended up purchasing it off of eBay. It was $5. There was only 100 of them coming out, and I received it. It's really cool. It really draws back to the old fanzines of the 70s and 80s, and it's about digest size. Comes in at 48 pages. It has a lot of different writers, and it's all about the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's a very cool piece. Right before we went on, I checked on eBay to see if there was any more on there, and the guy hasn't put any up yet for sale. But I'm gonna try to maybe put his contact information. He has an email on the website. If anybody's interested out there, they could get a hold of him and see if there's any more that he has left, because I believe he's only doing 100 of them before moving on to issue number 2, which I'm going to hopefully have a little article in issue number 2.
Oh, so wow.
Wow, you really went ahead with the thing here.
Yeah, so that was my big week, and my fanzine. So, but yeah, let's get into.
Well, tell you what, Joe. Let me start this out, because I was really amazed with the article. Now, the last time we spoke here with Mr. Famous Mesmer here, we had talked about it, and coincidentally, he told us he had wrote an upcoming article in the Scary Monsters magazine. Now, one thing I wanted to tell you about Mike is that I found fascinating about your article is 2 things. One, when I was a kid, Hollywood Boulevard to me would have been 42nd Street in New York City.
Right.
And I was taken there very young, and you could say I kind of experienced my first magic shops right on that boulevard, because the fact is that I did read comic books and I saw the novelty items in comic books, but when you went to 42nd Street, they had one particular magic shop in the center of town there, and I used to go there to buy my first novelties. In fact, one of my very first novelties that I bought there was the electric shocking pen,
Oh,
which
wow.
at the time was 1895, which was a lot of money in early 1970s. I'm
Right.
surprised my parents bought it for me.
Was that at Tannen's Magic Shop?
No, not Tannins. The name of the Tannins was on 26, I think, or 34th Street. No, the shop was called Funky something. I don't remember,
Huh.
but the first part of it was Funky, Funky, and it was a magic shop, and they used to sell like cigarette products and stuff like that. But it was located basically right across the street from the Times Square Plaza One, which is where they, break the ball every year in New Year's Eve, where the
Mm-hmm.
ball comes down. It was right
Yeah.
across the street. And it was there, gosh, who knows how many years. I remember when I was married, it was still there. So
Wow.
it was there for years. But here's another thing that was interesting. Now, you explained in your article that what basically drew you to Magic's when your parents took you to that parade on Hollywood Boulevard, and you talk about that famous Wheeler's Magic Shop that was there, and how you went inside, and before Don Poe's mask came out, you actually saw some masks there that were, I forget the name of the person you mentioned that had created them, and how they would go for $8.95, and now your parents
Yeah.
bought you a $1.95 magic trick. Well, the thing is, we kind of have the same similar background. And what I thought I'd bring up to your plate is something, I don't know if you ever realized it, but when you spoke about the very first film, how they started doing magic in film and used to use magic. And I guess how do you pronounce the name of the Frenchman?
George Maillet.
Okay, George Maillet. When he did that on screen where his wife turns into a skeleton,
Yeah.
okay, that same trick, they use Aurora models. Aurora or Monogram used to have a thing called the Vampire Strange Change, and
Ooh.
it was sold in Famous Monsters back in the 70s. And what it is a coffin, and you have a key, and of course, there's a model kit. You put it together, glue it together, and it has
Okay.
Dracula inside or a vampire. And then when you turn the key and open the coffin, there's a skeleton. It uses the exact same technique, which I see now they probably copied it off that film.
Wow.
I just thought it was very interesting when I was reading that.
That
And
is interesting. That's very interesting. I have
yeah,
remembered. I'm a big Aurora fan of the Aurora models. I built several of them when I was young, and I didn't. I was not aware of that. That is so cool.
it's called the Vampire Strange Change. And they also had, I think, another one that was a mummy or something like that, but it's called Vampire Strange Change. And they
Wow.
actually remade it recently. Company, I don't know if it was oh gosh, what's the name of the new company that puts out Polar Lights?
Yeah.
One of them redid it recently, and I also rebought it. The original Aurora that I had, I think it was Aurora. Right now I don't remember the exact name. Maybe Joe, you buy a computer that you could probably look it up and tell me. But mine, I sold it on eBay for like $350 years ago, and
Jeez.
it was glow in the dark. But that's what I'm saying. It was fascinating when I read that. I'm like, my God, that's where they got that idea from. And then also, I found it very interesting when you said about Solvi at the end in the mummy's hand when he did
Oh
the
yeah.
disappearing rock. Well, it's kind of interesting because about a year or so ago, I started putting together a magic trick, which is based on the stones of the Arizona desert, what they call Death Valley moving stones. And you
Mm-hmm.
reminded me of that particular trick because I was getting a rock to move across the surface. And
Oh
I think it's
wow.
fascinating. I really enjoy your article, man. It was great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's cool that you relate to it that way. That is so cool.
Yeah, that now for anyone that doesn't know, real quick, the article that we're referencing is in Scary Monsters 121. It's the spring edition. It is the monstrously memorable Mummy movies issue. If you haven't got your copy yet, go ahead and your local bookstore should have it, or you could go online. You could find it anywhere online. in the Michael's article of Monsters and Magic. It's part one of. Is there going to be two parts, Michael? I take it.
Yeah, two parts. It's about 5,000 words each section, and yeah, they're available at Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, and probably most of your comic book diamond dealers have it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the Scary Monsters website, which you could get directly from the publisher, which is mymoviemonsters.com, all one word. But there was one thing on here, Michael, that really struck me, and it is actually your first paragraph of the article, and I want to read that real quick and then discuss it, because it really made me think. I mean, the whole article was fantastic, and I learned a lot from it, but it was really the first paragraph, and I'll read it real quick. It says, growing up as a monster kid, I have always loved both monsters and theatrical magic. Not surprisingly, many of my fellow monster kid friends also had and continue to have a deep interest in both. In many ways, the two subjects are forever intertwined. No, I love that, because I always say that there's certain things that are just that us monster kids that we gravitate, toward.
Sure.
If you love classic monster movies and sci-fi movies, you're probably going to be a fan of mail order novelties,
yes,
of magic, of the Three Stooges, of the Little Rascals, of 50s surf music, which is still popular today. But you're always going to have comic books. There's always these things that I've been finding that if you're a monster kid, they always, there's these certain subjects that always, go with it. And
they do.
Yeah. And that really made me think about it. Now, I when I grew up, the only magic that I really knew about was, whenever David Copperfield came on our TV, because we had an old, Zenith with 3 channels. And if we were lucky, we got 4 channels. But I always waited, for that David Copperfield, special to come on, because that was the only thing I knew about magic, unless I went to a birthday party and some clown showed up that was doing, magic. But, I distinctly remember being at my grandmother's house always and catching it on TV, and we would sit there and watch, the hour or two, however long he played, and just being fascinated by it, and getting my own, little kit and trying to learn magic, which I never had the patience for, but I always like to try. But, as I grew older and then getting to know Eddie, especially, I started getting more into magic, not performing it myself, because, I just can't, but I really like the history of it and learning about it and, how it all started. So your article really put a new level onto, especially like movies. I never knew that magicians and all that had that big of a part in the the early days of movie magic.
Yeah, that's true. And most people don't, and the deal is that really magicians as I say, George Méliès was the very first magician who did all the magic trick movies, the trick movies. And that was to demonstrate what he could do that he couldn't do on stage, that he wanted to take it to a different level. And so a lot of things are based on, special effects we have now. Of course, it's jumped to CGI, but up until CGI, most everything was based on a lot of what he created.
Yeah, that was really interesting to learn. And that, I mean, I would have never, now it almost seems like, duh, yeah, of course magicians would have been involved with movie magic, but that never really, struck me before until I read your article here and you started getting into some of these, classic movies. Especially one of my favorites was the moon one, Trip to the Moon.
Trip to the Moon. That's right.
Yeah, that was, one of my favorite old movies. And, you also talk about West of Zanzibar, which I have yet to see that one. It's on my list. I want to find it on DVD, but that's another movie
they do have that available on DVD. They do it on demand where you have to order it and they make it. But it's very clear, actually. It's a very clear copy. And Lon Chaney, freaking amazing in that film. And then there's a newer version that was a speaking version of it that was out a few years later. I didn't want to make the article just focus on that one story, so I didn't include it, but it's called Congo. And it's also starring the original star that starred in it on Broadway. And he's in, it's a speaking version, and it's equally interesting. So you might want to, I like watching both of them back to back. It's kind of interesting to pair them up.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. So what I'd like to really get into, if you don't mind, is if you want to give us, maybe a brief or detailed history of how these magicians got into, all these movies and all that, and how it started to, evolve into what it is today.
You know something? Let me just bring in something really quick before you
Sure.
start there. It was kind of interesting too, Michael, and I want to bring this because I think this is kind of funny that when we first get you in our first show, it so happens you wrote about mail order stuff,
Yeah.
And now the funniest thing is we were talking about last week where Chuck mentioned that his favorite movie was The Devil Doll. And that's one
Yes.
of the ones you referenced there.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny. You got, I guess not only are you a hypnotist, you're kind of like some type of guy that has ESP or something like that. Am I correct? Well, go ahead. I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if that devil doll that they reference in the story is the same one as Chuck, because there's two different devil dolls, and they both have different plots. But I'm imagining it was the one. But yeah, there's a couple of different devil doll films. So, but they're both very fascinating and interesting. But anyway, yeah. As far as magicians getting into the movies, like I say, they literally began the movies as far as special effects, science fiction, horror. Because again, George Méliès, he did the first horror film. He did the first acknowledged sci-fi film. So, and then as things went on, of course, with the silent film industry, being it was out of LA and Hollywood, well, then for a lot of the plots, they needed magic. So they went to local suppliers. At that time, Thayer, who was a premier builder of magic, and so he supplied a lot of the props for the Chaney film, and it went on from there. So yeah, it's interesting, the intertwining. And when I talk about magic in the movies, people need to understand I'm talking about theatrical magic that's actually done live on stage by magicians they took and applied to the films. So it's kind of interesting that way. A lot of people watch the films and think maybe it's a special effect, some of the things in those films that I outline, but in reality, they're actually doing real stage magic.
Yeah, that's really, interesting, and I never really looked at it at that way. Now, you did reference that some magicians, they were credited to movies and some weren't. Was it, common that magicians were, or that they weren't accredited to the movies, and why would they not be accredited to them if they weren't?
Well, it's even to this day, to a great extent, that happens. And I think because maybe a lot of times, I don't know, some of the magicians may have not been union or something else. That could be a possibility. But also, that just wasn't a normal thing they would add to the credits of films. And unless sometimes if the magician appeared in the film as an actor and, like for instance, Mission Impossible, Tony Giorgio was the card expert, gambling expert, and magician expert that advised them on about 7 of their episodes. And normally he would also be an actor on there as well. He was also in The Godfather, Tony Giorgio. But anyway, so when you were in the film as an actor, like in The Mad Magician, there's a magician that was the person that taught, Vincent Price what he was doing, but he was also a bit part in the movie. So then they would normally think about, let's include him on the credits as a magic consultant.
Right.
But sometimes when they would just acquire magic from Thayer or Owen Magic or something like that, and maybe have someone else on the set helping them with it, they wouldn't normally necessarily include them, which is a shame because in some of these films, the magic was an incredibly important part of the film.
Right. Now, another thing that I was wondering too, as I was reading your article, because as we know is, with anything new, you get pushback from, that certain part of the community. So when these magicians started working for these studios, was there any pushback from the magic community?
I think they were kind of revered because the magic in these films that I'm talking about and the ones that will be in the next part of the article, the magic was presented in a way where it wasn't exposed, where it was done just as you would do it on stage. When magic's exposed is when there's an issue. But
Okay.
at the time, these magicians such as L.O. Gunn and the ones I referenced in the article, and the builders like, Thayer and all that, they were revered and actually highly respected for being able to be part of the Hollywood scene and interject magic into it.
Okay, great. Now, I know you and Eddie could really elaborate on this. And like I said, I'm still in my infancy of learning about magic, but I really enjoy learning all the aspects of it, especially now that I know that it played a integral role in classic movies. But what was the role that Houdini started playing in movies? And I know you touch a little bit on the article here and how he wanted to become a movie star, but can you let the audience and myself as well know how did Houdini start in the movies, or why did he start in the wanting to start in the movies away from stage?
Well, he was at a point in his career. Well, first of all, touring is very grueling, and especially with what Houdini did and what I do with my danger magic. And of course, David Blaine currently, he does incredible physical challenges Houdini did. And so touring, it gets very, very challenging. And the movie business was just beginning at that time with the silent film industry and everything. And he saw it as an opportunity not only to be a star in a film, but to create his own movie company. So he was looking at it from a business standpoint, I'm sure, at also being seen. And also remember, the movie theaters were starting to kill a lot of the vaudeville and all of the live performing at that time. So he probably saw it as the future and thinking, well, I've got to get involved in this future, or I'm going to be, put out, where I'm not going to have the kind of touring ability I had. It happened to Blackstone and all of them at that point because the movies were taking over the old theaters and vaudeville was ending. And so it was a good move on his part. But unfortunately, in Houdini's case, I love watching the films, but they weren't with him. He wasn't he didn't like to kiss women on screen. He was very loyal to his wife, although the books will say that he had affairs, which he probably did. But he was old fashioned in the sense that he felt uncomfortable kissing on the movie screen and things like that. So you had Valentino at that time and those kind of performers that were Latin lovers, etc. And you needed to have that sex symbol type thing. Houdini was basing his off of his skills and seeing things on the film that he usually did live or couldn't even do live, hanging from planes, all these things. And so he thought that he would be more like a Jackie Chan of that era, where he did his own stunts, and that would be his selling point. But in the end, he needed better scripting and more of a love affair type script to reach the audiences of that era.
Now Houdini did a couple movie serials, which I'm a huge serial fan. Usually once a week I get together with a buddy of mine. He's in his late 70s, early 80s, and we have coffee and watch some old serials. So we don't watch too many silent ones. We have watched a few, but you talk about a few Houdini silent serials, which I didn't realize he was in. Can you speak a little bit on those? I believe one was the Master Mystery, and the other one was the Grim Game.
Yeah, and there's Haldane of the Secret Service, and yeah, there's several, and they're all really actually. If you want to see Houdini doing his real escapes, they can be trying on you because the plots on some of them. The Grim Game is the best if you want to start with one. Although
Okay.
the Mystery for me I love because it shows more escapes, so I like that as a magician. But I would start with the Grim Game if you're interested in watching one. But they are serials, and they do plot along to some extent to us that are in modern times here. Of course, we all know one of the greatest serials of that type of all time was Captain Marvel, I think.
Oh, absolutely,
We
yeah.
could probably agree on that.
And you know what? And I was, as I was reading the article, I was thinking of Eddie because he's such a huge robot fan. And you mentioned in here the Master Mystery, which premiered in 1918, has the first ever robot.
Yes, there's a lot of controversy on that, as I mentioned, because a lot of people like ourselves, some of them feel that it wasn't the first robot because it ends up being a person in the robot costume. But you don't know that till the last part of the very last episode of the serial. And for me as a kid, it was still a robot. I mean, and
Right.
I didn't get to watch the serials till many years later because they weren't available. But when I saw the posters and the Houdini books, when I was getting into magic, like, wow. And if you look at that design, they pretty much kept with that design for so many different things, until we got to like, Robbie the Robot and Lost in Space. Up until that time, most robots resembled to a great extent, the robot from that film, from that serial.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Eddie, what do you think, Eddie? Is that a robot? Would that be considered
Well,
a robot in your eyes?
of course it would, because let's be honest, every single film we grew up in sci-fi and everything, always had a person inside. So yes, that would be the first time a robot ever appeared. And one thing I could say is that a lot of people don't realize also that Houdini was the first man when he went down to Australia. Since he tried to do everything, he was the first guy to ever fly a plane in that country. He bought his
Yes.
own plane and stuff. And some people don't realize that. But one thing I'm going to tell you about that robot, a couple of months ago, I decided I wanted to try, because I noticed back in the 1900s, early 1900s, there was a company in Spain that actually offered the plans on how to put that. It was kind of like a model kit of that robot. And
Wow.
yeah, it was put onto a cardboard where you would cut it out and build it. And I have been trying for, like, oh my gosh, probably for the last 6 months trying to obtain a copy of that.
Wow. That would be so cool.
It would be. I think it would be awesome to even actually put it on the website. But the whole thing is, even David, with all his connections on that, has not come across one.
Wow.
It would be very, very interesting. But I have come across one, but I'm going to probably need an artist to redraw it so that we have, the images are 100% there, but to make it so that it's easier to actually put together. But yeah, that's
Eddie, what is your favorite robot? I'm curious. I mean, out of all the
my
robot film and all that.
my favorite robot of all time has got to be Down to Earth, the Lost in Space B9 robot, because that's the one that everybody I would think our age probably grew up watching as
It's
a
true.
robot, where it helped Will Robinson. The Robbie the Robot, even though it has sometimes more popularity, and so does Gort from The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, a lot of people forget. Gort was not really technically, it was a robot, but it was more like a statue. The only thing cool about Gort was the one eye that he had a laser coming from. Robbie the Robot, when he appeared in the Lost in Space episode called The Robot Toy, I was afraid of it growing up. As a little kid, that he scared me there. So
Yes.
I wasn't a big fan. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of that particular robot. Later on, I'm like, it might even look cooler than the Lost in Space robot. But, in all honesty, I think anybody who grew up in our age will probably say the world's most famous robot is obviously the B9, which is the Lost in Space robot.
Yeah.
But I mean, every robot that I've ever liked, built, or tried to even do looks kind of like the Houdini one.
Yeah, that's true.
That
You know,
that
I tell you, Eddie, in regard to Gort, I was performing in China on an elite cruise ship back in the '80s, and actually the wife of the man who designed Gort, and she also worked with him on the design of him and all. She was on the ship as a passenger, and she gave me her silver glass for when my child was born to do his baptism out of, and for when he was born. And she also helped me with my artwork because I like to draw comics as well. And so that's something I haven't really exploited fully yet. But anyway, she helped me with my artwork, gave me an art pad, but she was responsible for helping design Gort.
that's interesting. I know there was one particular guy, I forget his name, but he purchased the original Robbie the Robot out of some pizzeria in California, and he restored it. Later, he was offered by a Japanese company. I think it was over 100,000 for it, which he didn't obviously take. But I know he started reproducing. They call him the Robot Man, and he makes versions of the Robbie, the Gort, and the Lost in Space. And the Robbies go for about 24,000. The Lost in Space go for about 22, and Gort I think does about 12,500. I know in either case, the wife threatened to throw me out of the house if I ever did purchase one. So
there's a
I'm
Robbie the Robot facsimile in the nuclear bomb museum in Las Vegas.
Oh
is the
wow.
Yeah, he greets you when you come in going into the museum.
That's awesome. I actually went to a chiller theater last year, and they had two B9s, life size B9s,
Oh
and
wow.
I took photos with them and everything. And I stood there and I was like, damn, and I feel like just grabbing this and taking it home. They're pretty.
Did you ever buy any of the Zeroids? Remember the Zeroids, the little toy robots?
Yeah, you know what? Yes, I do. I think I have some,
I
and
love
you.
those.
Yeah, they're really cool. But I don't know if you remember. I wasn't. I don't know why they didn't attract me that much. But there was one called Dingaling. Do you remember that set in
I
the
don't
early
remember.
70s? It was kind of like a roller coaster, and the robots would go, and there was King Ding and whatever, and they walked through this battery operated. I had like two or three of them, but I don't know what it is. I never pursued them. Today they're rare. They go on eBay for a couple of $100 whenever they come in. But yeah, Zoe, the one you're talking about, again, I really, really grew up with the one robot in mind all my life was Robbie the robot.
But what about the robot in Fireball XL5?
Um,
He was cool because he was all clear, kind of. He was really neat. I liked him. Of course, I liked the whatever process they did. I love that series.
the you know what? To me, when it comes to being like favorite robots, like I said, B9, the Lost in Space. I
Yeah.
said a
Oh
few
yeah.
seconds ago, I said Robbie by accident, but B9 was always number one. But the
I
only
agree.
robot that I respect as a robot that I really like is actually made out of Japan during World War II in the 1940s,
Oh.
and he's called the Smoking Spaceman. If you're
Hmm.
familiar with that particular one, it's a silver robot. It looks like what a robot should be like. Um,
Hmm.
I also one story I mentioned. One of the shows I previously had is there was a Shiny Time Station when my 34-year-old daughter was, I think, very young. They had Shiny Time Station on
Yeah.
Channel
Uh-huh.
13. And Schemer, the guy who played the maintenance
Yeah.
guy for the station, one day out of a comic book, he orders a life-size robot. And the robot was supposed to do his bidding. You know, he was going to let the robot clean the shop, do everything, but whatever. The robot went crazy and started giving away free rides and money. So he sold the robot. But when I saw the costume, I found myself getting a hold of the company up in Canada that made
Oh wow.
and the robot. And I spoke to the actual creator of the robot, and I was like, "Are you guys going to use that prop? Can I buy it?" So what he instead did is he offered me for, I think it was $1,500. He was going to make me a copy of it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, I want the original." But apparently that's where it ended right there. But again, the closest thing, and I'm sure I don't know if you ever seen this film, Santa Claus and the Spaceman,
Oh
or
yeah, of course.
what is it
Are,
called?
are you talking about Santa Claus and the Martians or
Yeah, Santa Claus, the Martians in
with Pia
Kidnap
Zadora?
Santa Claus.
Yeah.
That particular robot there, again, is the type of robot that I like when it looks
Okay.
like that. That's why the 7-foot robot plans that I wanted as a kid and I still don't have resembles a robot very close to one of that shape, and that's why it's always been like I don't like the robots that are out there today, especially the Japanese one. The most people like, oh gosh, what are the names of those robots? They're so famous. Do you know, Joe? It's probably when you were younger. All the famous Japanese robots. They look like Shogun
Oh
warriors.
yeah, like Gazinga and all of those.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I
I
have
don't,
a couple of those.
I don't like them. I have the one, and I have an original, which is selling for like $2,000 right now. That he turns into a truck. He's a
Oh
red
yeah.
truck. What is it called?
Well,
Are you talking about Optimus Prime?
Yes, I have an Optimus Prime in the
oh,
box.
Transformers.
Transformers. You know what? I don't like it. I bought it because my son-in-law liked it, and you know what? I'm gonna get it, and I don't know. I pay like 200 for it, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't care for that particular style of robot. I
You know
really
what?
don't.
I'm the same way. I grew up, watching Transformers, but I never got into it. I've always liked the old robots from the serials. And I used to watch,
Yes.
right. There used to be a cartoon, and you can still find it now online, but in the 80s was Muppet Babies by Jim Henson. And
Yeah.
Jim Henson was a huge fan of serial cliffhangers. So you could see a lot of times in his movies, he would add stuff in there, from uh, different movies or different shows. A lot of them
Yeah.
classic, but he put a lot of serial cliffhanger stuff in there. So I always more gravitated towards those robots, which, the one from Santa Claus Conquers the Martian, he resembles kind of a serial cliffhanger robot. But one of my favorites was always from Zombies of the Stratosphere.
Oh yeah.
Man, the robot in there, it's such a simple robot. You could tell it's a person inside, but I just love those style of robots for some reason. They're very simple. They're generic looking, and
I think the reason you love them too when you were a kid is because you could envision yourself building one or getting in one for Halloween or being able to make something similar. And so it was really cool because you could maybe be a robot.
Well, that's what we used to do. We used to get a box and put it on, spray paint it silver, and then get the Pringles cans, and you would take off the label, and it would be silver, and that would be your arms. And so you would, go outside and play robot, and you look like those old cereal robots.
Yeah. Joe, every time I hear you say that, I swear I kind of want to laugh because those Pringle boxes or cans are pretty thin. So you must have been a very skinny kid.
Well, yeah, I'm talking, when I'm 5, 6 years old, not yesterday when I was a kid.
Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you guys something really quick, Mike.
Yeah.
When back in the 1950s, Boys Life magazine, which is obviously the leading Cub Scout magazine for over 100 and some years, had a couple of build your own robot articles in it.
Ooh.
And because of those articles, they actually repeated the same article a couple of times, like 3 or 4 times. And that became the hottest selling magazine that month. And kids love building the projects with robots. So we did grow up, like you said, it was something you can build. As a kid, who didn't want to have his own laser pistol?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. And then Johnson Smith would offer you how to build your own laser pistol plans. I mean, hey, in fact, one of the things that we had in one of the recent episodes where we had this, I think it was, what was the name of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just forgot one of our guests. He was the guy who did lightsabers. And it's not good to forget names. I guess we're getting older, right?
Yeah.
Michael Osborne, I think it was. Is that correct, the name, Joe?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Okay.
If he's listening, he could let you know. Send all your hate mail to Eddie.
Right.
Yeah, send all your hate mail because I forgot your name. But but the thing is, it's William Osborne, I believe. And what happened, he was one of the guys that worked with a guy named Bob Iannini, who owns Amazing One, or that famous, it's a mail order company that sold all the electronic futuristic stuff from laser guns to any plan. And you would find that all the time in Popular Science throughout the 70s and 80s. And, it's fascinating because he sold everything that we as a kid growing up wanted to build.
Well, what's funny is you talk about laser pistols, and it just reminded me of what, again, what I used to do as a child, 5, 6 years old, because I liked working with my hands and, creating stuff. I used to get the toilet paper rolls.
Oh yeah.
Or the paper towel rolls, and I would, color them up and tape them together, and I would make those into my laser pistols. And, I would run around the yard fighting, aliens that were invading my area. But, that was, the early laser pistols for me. I think back at how funny it is.
Joe, the thing is that our generation, well, I'm older than you, I'm sure, but our generations will say, we did all those things. And for me, like, I would make everything out of tinfoil as well. I wanted to surf, so I covered my whole body in tinfoil and made a surfboard out of foil. This is something I'm worried for the future, really, because kids now literally don't have to have a creative process anymore. They use their phone or their computer, and that's it. There's no creative process, no doing hands-on. There's no making something out of nothing and making it reality. And I think a lot of the great inventors and great things that happen in our country happen because all of us grew up like that, or on a farm having to use whatever we had there to make an imaginary world. And so I'm a little concerned about the future because this, what we're discussing, which was such a wonderful time, in some ways doesn't literally exist anymore.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I know we've talked about it several times on this podcast about, with these generations now, there is that creative process is lost because now everything's at their fingertips. But when I and I'm a lot younger than you guys, but when I grew up in the 80s, we didn't have much money and we didn't have access to many things. If you needed something, you had to go out and try to find it. There was no internet or anything. So when I wanted, to play spaceman or something outside, I would wrap my head in tin foil and that would be my space helmet, and I'd have my paper towel, laser pistol, and that's what we did. And then at the end of the day, you took it off and you started over with something the next day. I could remember I was a huge G.I. Joe fan. I loved loved everything military and all that. So I can remember getting a box and spending the whole night. I put on a war movie, which I believe it was Born on the 4th of July, if you guys remember that movie.
Yeah.
And I had this box and I used crayons and I colored it camouflage. I put straps on it and I made my own radio. It was like a backpack radio that I used the next day, running around the neighborhood, like I was on a military radio. And, today, sadly, a lot of young kids, they'll go out and just buy something, or they'll not even want to go through that creative process. And it's kind of sad.
That's what led to a lot of the great people that created the space programs and everything else, because they had that process in their head. They could think beyond what they could see in front of their face.
Right.
That's the thing. Well, of course, we've seen this in Star Trek and many other things where they have a story where someone can't make the jump to the next place because they don't have that imagination. They have all the tools and the knowledge, but it takes that imagination to make the next jump to be able to go to the next place,
Yeah, and speaking of the imagination, I notice it, and I'm sure you guys do too, is you go to stores and you see these young kids shopping with their parents and they're on their phones the whole time.
Yeah.
When I remember being at the stores, going to Hills department stores or Ames, going there with my parents, I hated shopping with them, unless we were in the toy aisle, of course.
Right.
But I had to use my imagination, and I just, I just kind of, went to a different world and was thinking up of, army scenarios or, alien battle scenarios in my head to pass the time, because we'd be at the store for an hour or so and I'm just walking around bored, waiting to get to the toy aisle. So I would use my imagination.
Right.
And today that's kind of lost because they're just, on their phones playing games or watching movies, which, isn't inherently bad because the world's geared towards technology. But, as you guys know, if you go too far to one side, you're going to lose a part of something else. There has to be a happy medium in there somewhere.
Well, and you wonder, Joe and Eddie, you wonder if there was a neutron bomb that happened and all the technology stopped overnight, what would these people be able to do? How could they survive?
Yeah. But yeah, I think it almost might be for the best.
Yeah, it might be. I was going to say, Joe, you said you liked Jim Henson then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I met Jim Henson one time.
Really?
Yeah, strangely enough, it was in Singapore. I was actually performing on a cruise ship over in Asia, and they were in dry dock. So I spent the week in Singapore, and there was a film festival going on. In fact, I went to see the premiere before it was even released of Star Trek, the one with the whales. Okay. So I went to see Star Trek, the premiere of it, and they had people there that were producers talking about, well, Jim Henson was at that film thing too. And when I came out of the movie, I was going through like this mall area, and here comes Jim Henson walking with Kermit in his arms. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and so I walked up and said, Mr. Henson. Of course, we didn't have our cell phones, right? There was no cameras. But I met him. I said, I love your work. I've loved the Muppets since, on Ed Sullivan and everything. And he had Kermit talk to me, and he was so awesome. So I actually had a personal meeting with Jim Henson and Kermit in the middle of a mall in Singapore.
That's awesome. Because I grew up, on Muppet Babies and Fraggle Rock in the 80s. And a buddy of mine a few years ago turned me on to a Christmas special that he did called Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas from '77. I'm sure you guys have seen that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would tell you were talking about Muppet Babies. When the union striked out here, they had to find people to fill the roles. And I was just almost going to be Fozzie Bear and the Muppet Babies.
Oh, really?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, Fozzie Bear.
Oh, that's awesome. You have to do the rest of the podcast in that voice now. I mean,
you know, I thought you were going to ask Mr. Hansen how much you want for Kermit.
Right, you would. I know you would, Eddie.
Yeah.
I probably,
But
probably
yeah,
would.
so yeah, I was almost Fozzie Bear. In fact, I went in the studio, we were cutting it, and then the unit thing settled, and they went back to who they had. But I was that close to being Fozzie Bear.
Oh man, that would have been really, really cool, man.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely would have been in the annals of history.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite cartoons from that era, and it's actually really hard to find now uncut because of all the film and movie stuff that he had, intertwined in there. Especially when Gonzo would open up the closet, it would be a robot coming after a black
Yes.
robot or something. But I did find that there's I believe it's from somewhere in England. You have to go through eBay and you could buy the DVD set, and
Wow.
it's completely uncut. It has all the original scenes on it. So I've been looking for that, and I caught a few of them on YouTube, and man, did it bring back some memories. And
Yeah.
And people out there might be laughing, saying, "Oh, Muppet Babies," but I'll tell you, you watch it, and there is definitely some adult oriented innuendo in the Muppet Babies that you catch now.
I want to see if you guys remember this hit. Okay, now our friend William Osborne, that's the one I was talking about. He's a great inventor and had a lot of stuff to do. But here's the funny thing about: do you guys remember Morgan Freeman? Well, I know, Joe, you're not going to remember this, but I know William. I'm sure. I mean, Michael, I'm sure you do. It's when he was the Dracula in the Electric Company.
Yes.
I am the Count, or I forgot what it was. Count. Oh my God, what did he go under? Count. But he played that. Actually, to be honest with you, Morgan Freeman was a scary vampire in that show.
I don't recall him doing the vampire as much as being on it. I watched him on it.
Oh yeah, he did. He was one time he played. And he says, "I am Count something, the vegetable vampire." Do you remember?
Wow.
That? Oh yeah, Morgan Freeman played an awesome role in the Electric Company.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up now. Vincent the vegetable vampire.
Yeah, Vincent the Vincent.
Oh my goodness!
And it is awesome. That's an awesome. In fact, I think honestly, one of the reasons I like Morgan Freeman so much today as an actor is because he played that. And I gotta be honest with you,
I have to check that out now. He
looks like a real mean vampire. Like you would be afraid,
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. He got the fangs, and he's biting into a cucumber.
Oh my gosh,
that is awesome.
Cool.
I actually got the entire Electric Company on DVD, and there was. Let me ask you this question now, Michael. You got to remember, the Hilarious House of Frightenstein, not Frankenstein, Frightenstein, and they used to use Vincent Price at the end as a narrator.
It's in the back of my head somewhere.
Okay, it played only in my area for one season, which was 1973. And it was where it starts, where you had the librarian, you had the guy who played Dracula, and he had Frankenstein in a slab, and he would say, "Brucey, Brucey, Bruce."
Wow.
It was the same Canadian actor that played all the parts.
Wow.
From The Mummy. He played the librarian, which looked like a very old Mark Twain. And he would go into, I said, "No, I'm going to read a story." And then he had to blow dust off the books. That show, I think, was not aired much in this country, even though, believe it or not, it went for like 20 seasons in Canada.
Right.
I think it was because of copyright infringements, because they tried to call it, instead of the Hilarious House, which as a kid I understood to be Frankenstein, it was Frightenstein. And they only came out a few years ago with about 8 episodes on DVD, and they sold out like the same day it came out. That show, a lot of people never remembered it. And it was, in my opinion, one of my favorite shows as a kid. I used to love that. And then they had, I don't know, here's going to ring a bell when I mentioned this one. The same guy played a wolfman, and he called himself, "I am the Wolfman." And he used to play psychedelic music. You don't remember him at all?
No, you mean Wolfman Jack?
No. On the show, The Hilarious House of Frightenstein.
Oh, I don't
remember. They showed different episodes. And let me see if I can look up who played that. It was a Canadian actor. And the funny thing about this actor is he played every single part. Uh, Let me see, Joe, are you there that you can look it up?
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up now. I'm looking at it. It ran from, it looks like 19, it started in 1971, ran 130 episodes. It was
Listen to
a
that.
Canadian children's show.
Wow.
Was it Billy Van? Is that who you're?
Yes, yes. Billy Van played every single character on
Wow.
the show. But I got to tell you
Oh
something.
wow, Vincent Price was on it too.
No. Vincent Price was not really on the show. He was the narrator.
Oh,
Like it would
okay.
say, "Come to the hilarious house of Frighten." It
Oh,
was
this is funny. I'm looking. You were talking about the Wolfman. It says a werewolf disc jockey at radio station Eek who spun rock and roll records while doing a Wolfman Jack impression.
yeah, that's
That's
the
really
one.
cool.
Let me tell you, that show was hilarious. It's goofy because I did buy the 8 episodes, whatever, and I tried to get the entire run, but I think it's very hard to get in this country. Very hard
Oh
to get.
man, I
But
got to check this out, man. This
no,
is
but I'm
I gotta
telling you,
take a note.
it's a goofy show. There's a part where a gorilla comes and gets hit with a ping pong ball in his head, and he falls down. But the show is hilarious. I mean, like I love it. I can go back and like I said, a lot of people didn't know about the show, but I know in the East Coast, in New York City, it ran in 1973 or
Hmm.
74 for one season, and it never ran again. But I used to love, and the thing that really drew me to the show was the Vincent Price voice.
Interesting.
That's cool. Yeah, you could find it on. It's on DVD. It
Yeah, but
came
it's
out in
only
2005.
there's
What's
Well,
only
that?
there was a lot of regional things like that that's on East Coast or West Coast. Like when I was little, there was a show in LA that it was a kid show hosted by a little Frank. It was called Shrimpenstein. And it's kind of interesting because it was back in the 60s, I think about 67, 66. I actually own a Shrimpenstein that I bought down at Hollywood Magic. Shrimpenstein was created actually by Wad Chang, who created a lot of the phasers and the communicators in Star Trek. Anyway, he's like a ventriloquist dummy, but he was made because jelly beans fell into the monster machine, and it created Shrimpenstein. And it's a cool little show, and I think we'll have a few episodes or something. But yeah, we had that out here. That was local on KCAL 9. I don't think it went across the country. So there's a lot of these pocket shows that, like you're talking about and I'm talking about, that many of us never have seen.
That is correct. But another thing that I'm going to tell you about the West Coast and East Coast that still resonates to this day for some reason. Anytime, and I remember the original owner of Fun Factory, when I joined forces with him, Lou Weiss, he said to me, Eddie, we waited for there to be storms in the West Coast. Because when there were storms or even snowstorms, like in Washington State, he said, we got bombarded by mail orders,
Wow.
ordering stuff. And I've realized that half of the stuff that I sell for some crazy reason, the people that order this stuff are usually from California. I don't know why.
Wow.
I mean, that's an interesting part of the mail order thing. You would think, wow, everybody in the East Coast would buy this stuff, but most of my buyers are from the West Coast.
That is so interesting.
Which led me to believe one time that I wonder somebody in the West Coast has the robot plans that someday I can come across them.
Yeah.
I was just looking on eBay, and there is a Shrimpenstein fan club card and letter on there for sale.
Huh.
Yeah,
What is it selling for, Joe?
$39.99. It doesn't say.
I imagine my little Shrimpenstein is worth something. Then there's probably a fan base out there.
Yeah, there's no. I don't see a year or anything on it, but it comes with a letter, has a sticker on it, and then a fan club card, which is the front of it has where it says where you could put your name and on that, says you're an official member, and then the back of it has it says Shrimpenstein secret code for official members only, and it has A equals U, B equals Z, and so on.
Wow,
really cool.
Wow.
And I guess the guy messed up here because on the bottom of it says, danger, do not show anyone the Shrimpenstein secret code who is not a member, and he's showing it to people. So, he's got to give up his card.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
But that is really cool. I've never heard of Shrimpenstein, and you could actually, there's you shrimpenstein.com. There's a one page.
There's actually a kit too, Joe. There's a kit on Worth Point that it sells the puppet, a record, and I really can't tell what it is, but that's a letter. I guess you would join the club and they would send you that.
Oh,
wow.
Really?
I don't remember that character. And I was a big monster, but I've never seen that. That tells you how the West Coast and East Coast were different back in the early 70s.
Right. That's right.
That's really cool, man. I'm gonna I got some digging to do tonight on a few different titles.
I think there's some YouTube of Shrimpenstein. So
there is. I typed it in, and there's some clips you can find on YouTube and Vimeo.
Cool.
I was gonna say one thing to you guys. There is one particular guy that he's contacted me throughout the years in California, and he tells me that California, man, he says, hey, I used to look at all the good stuff in the East Coast, man. And when I was little, I would always send away for that stuff. Really nice guy.
Well, I did too. That's where I bought a lot of those mail stuff, and it wasn't in that era because I'm a little bit younger, but it was pre-your era, I think, Eddie, as far as owning the product stuff. But I did. I loved all that stuff, and what I loved too was the karate one too. They had the karate lessons, and you would have the pamphlet, and then you would have you put on your wall the poster, and it would have all the pressure points. You practice with that poster, and it looked like a burglar, like the old time burglar.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Yeah,
I have an original one of those. If you look at one of my early videos, I reproduced it, but you have to go to my YouTube channel and look at the really older videos where I look really young on it. And
that must be really, really old. I mean, what?
No, you'll see. I reproduced it. I used to reproduce them in Staples at the time, but
I actually have. You sent one to me years ago, Eddie, when we first started talking on Universal Monster Army. Yeah, you sent me a bunch of posters. That was one of them with the pressure points.
Get out of
here! Yeah, really? That is a really cool poster, man.
It is.
Yeah, it looked like a burglar, and it's funny because it said that when it said karate practice dummy. I remember going when I first got married to the different medical supply stores trying to see if there was one available, and they're like, "What?" And I said, "No, it's not a dummy. It's actually like a poster,
Yeah.
And, one of the biggest things when you're talking about that's a very old ad, by the way. It's very popular too, and it goes back to like the mid '60s.
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the pressure point dummy with karate. But there's an article. Which was written, I think it's in some type of writer's magazine. I forgot the name of it. I know I have the magazine, and it was 10, 15 years ago, but it's called The World's Deadliest Ads. And the guy who wrote the article did a whole history behind, everything from Count Dante, the deadliest man alive, to all those famous karate ads. But the thing with those karate ads was that they always promised the buyer the ultimate thing. Like your hands will become deadly, or the best one of all is the Honor House, which I always wanted to have as a kid, and then finally got one later on in life, which was the Pocket Gym, which was and it says this will slap on inches on your upper, and I'm like, slap inches from what? Pulling a rubber band,
Yeah.
But
hey guys, I hate to cut you off there, but we got a few minutes left here, so we're gonna have to wrap everything up. This has been a great conversation, but before we go, Michael, can you want to tell everyone where they could find you or how they could get a hold of you?
Yeah, great. Best way to do it probably is to go to one of my websites. I'll give you my magic website, but every site has contact info. But the magic site is www. I'll do the hypnosis one because it's easier. www.mesmer, MEZMER.weebly, WEEBLY.com. So www.mesmer.weebly.com.
Okay, awesome. And for anybody that wants to get a hold of Michal Mezmer, head over to that website. And if you need to get a hold of me and Eddie for anything, head over to houseoftheunusual.com. where we have the completely revamped website. There's a free email list and a free form that everybody can sign up and join and talk to some like-minded people. And there's even a spot in there where you could let us know what you want to hear on this podcast, or if you would like to be a guest. And also head over to YouTube, search in House of the Unusual, head over to our page there where there's a ton of videos. Eddie's always putting up something new and interesting. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and help support us. And, listen to us every week. And, thank you guys for joining us on the podcast. Michael, once again, thank you for joining us, and, hope you're back on very soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And go out and buy Scary Monsters, everyone. It's a cool magazine this month.
Absolutely. Scary Monsters 121 on your rack. And Michael, Eddie, been a great conversation, and I will see you guys later.
Later.
Awesome. Bye-bye.